First up at 9 o'clock tonight, in Arizona's family investigation, Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich scored a big win this week, going to court and forcing the Biden administration to keep a Trump-era immigration restriction in place.
But it's how he paid for that high-profile legal fight that caught the attention of our investigative team. Morgan Lowe spent the last 3 months looking at the Attorney General's budget. And Morgan, you found some of these politically charged legal fights like these are causing millions of dollars.
Yeah, and we found that Attorney General Brnovich has been increasingly using consumer fraud funds to pay for these legal fights, spending consumer fraud money on immigration battles, another investigation of the 2020 election. He even spent money on a gun rights case in New York City. All the while, the number of actual consumer scams in Arizona is increasing dramatically.
You know, we're social workers. It's not like we're raking in the dough, so to speak.
We are concealing this couple's identity because their consumer problem involves their teenage daughter's mental health.
Since we had tried counselors and therapists, we figured, okay, well, maybe a life coach would be a better approach.
1 month and $2,500 later, they say their new life coach stopped communicating and stopped meeting with their daughter.
Did you ask her for your money back?
I did.
What do you do at that point to try to get the money back? What did you do?
I filed a complaint with the General Attorney's Office.
That was just one of more than 15,000 consumer complaints the Arizona Attorney General's office received in the past year. Consumer scams and consumer fraud are reaching record levels across the country. According to the Federal Trade Commission, reports of social media scams alone doubled last year compared to the year before. Estimated losses there totaled $770 million. The problem is so bad, government agencies that are supposed to help consumers are drowning in complaints, so scam victims are often left to fend for themselves.
They have to hire a private attorney.
Robert Rutilla is a practicing attorney who represents victims of consumer fraud. He says he's forwarded several complaints to the Arizona Attorney General for prosecution, but each time the AG's office refused to go after the bad guy.
They say they reviewed the complaint, but unfortunately are unable to take action at this time. It's incredibly frustrating for me, but it's worse for my client.
If you think you have been a victim of consumer fraud,
the Arizona Attorney General's office is the state's primary consumer advocate. Enforcing the Arizona Consumer Fraud Act on behalf of consumers is a main responsibility of the office.
be assured every complaint is reviewed for any possible violations of the Arizona Consumer Fraud Act. Every single one.
But we found something odd in the Attorney General's budget. More than $3 million diverted from the Consumer Protection Consumer Fraud Revolving Fund into other non-consumer fraud divisions, including the politically charged Government Accountability, Voter Fraud, and Federalism units. Attorney General Mark Brnovich often cites the Federalism unit's work as he campaigns for the U.S. Senate.
What I am trying to do is protect hardworking Americans and hardworking Arizonans against the flood of illegal immigration and illegal drugs coming into this country.
Brnovich used the Federalism Unit and consumer fraud funds to fight President Biden's decision to stop building the border wall and to end Title 42 emergency immigration controls. He used those funds to take legal action in gun rights cases against New York City and the state of New Jersey. He used consumer funds for his own investigation of the 2020 general election, something that had been done already by other government agencies and organizations at least a half dozen times with no finding of fraud. We repeatedly requested an interview with Brnovich. His office said he was busy, although his Twitter page showed he did multiple interviews with Fox News during that time. Brnovich's office suggested we speak to Joseph Shirata, the division chief counsel for the Civil Litigation Division.
Why is that money being used to fund a unit that doesn't really appear to have anything to do with consumer fraud?
To answer your question directly, Morgan, it goes back to really, Civics 101. The statute that the fund comes out of says that our state legislature that has plenary appropriation power can appropriate out of that fund. And it also says that the fund can be used for attorney general operations globally, generally, including things like consumer protection and whatnot.
But it's called the Consumer Protection Consumer Fraud Revolving Fund. If the intent was to use it however the Attorney General wanted to, why would they call it this?
Well, let me just clarify you there. It's not how we want to use it. It's not how we get to use it. It's how we're told to use it.
Sharada says it is the legislature and the governor that set the budgets, and those entities decide where the consumer protection money should go. But we looked at the budget requests Brnovich's office submitted to the governor the last few years, and it's Brnovich who was and is requesting to divert those funds. And we found this letter from Brnovich to Governor Doug Ducey dated August 31st, 2017. In it, the Attorney General writes, "There is legal risk associated with using the funds for non-consumer protection salaries, since by statute, those monies may only be used for consumer restitution or for expenses to rectifying violations or alleged violations of consumer protection laws." The letter also states that the office was reassigning consumer protection attorneys to those other units, and that limits the number of investigations that consumer protection attorneys can initiate in response to consumer complaints.
It looks like AG Brnovich was concerned about this a few years ago, but then kept using these monies this way. Why would he have been concerned about it if it was, cut and dry?
Well, I can't speak to what that letter, I'm not familiar with that letter and what was in the AG's mind, but obviously the AG's concerned there's only a certain amount of funds in that fund.
Sharada says the AG's office responded to every one of the 15,000 complaints the office received last year and was able to recover millions of dollars for Arizona consumers. But he admits they do not actually take many cases to court.
I can't imagine a more important act to enforce than the Consumer Fraud Act.
Robert Rutilla says he thinks the AG needs to do more.
Well, the state's charged with the responsibility to enforce these laws, and it's a shame when they choose not to.
It's a similar message that Attorney General Brnovich offers on the campaign trail.
At the end of the day, this country is about the rule of law. And that means that we have to have people in public office, especially the executive branch, following the law.
I mean, it's a bit disappointing.
The husband and wife we interviewed say they are not satisfied with the response they got from the Attorney General's office, and they don't believe it helped them.
I don't think there's enough help for consumers out there.
We were able to help that family come to an agreement with the woman they paid the money to, and both sides say they are now satisfied. Meantime, the Attorney General's office is not happy with our reporting. They sent us a statement this afternoon reiterating their point that it is the legislatures that sets their budget and accusing me of mischaracterizing how the funds are being used.
Well, you're talking about a lot of money, Morgan. Where's it coming from? Are these tax dollars?
It's not tax dollars. These are funds that the Attorney General's office gets from taking consumer scams and con artists to court and recovering the money. And that's why the statute says it should be used for consumer investigations and consumer enforcement.
Okay, interesting, very interesting, Morgan. Thank you. 3 months, 3 months. And is this something that other Arizona attorney generals have done in the past?
Yeah, we wanted to know that as well. So as far as we could tell, nobody has used the money to the extent that Brnovich has on non-consumer issues. Former Attorney General Terry Goddard told me his administration was very careful with those funds. I could not get a hold of former Attorney General Tom Horn to ask him, but the description of this fund published while he was in office indicated it was to be used for consumer purposes.